But Jerry, first off, we want to touch on. We are going to be focusing mainly on the acolyte in this episode. We are the Star Jers, and we've been looking forward to this as well. And I think we have a lot to discuss. But before we get into that, I do want to get your thoughts on episode 5 of season 2 of House of the Dragon, Regent, directed by Claire Kilner, who directs a lot of the kind of moving the chess pieces across the board episodes of House of the Dragon. She's a regular,
Mhm.
but she gets kind of the in-betweeny episodes. And this was that. Last week, obviously, we got a huge episode and we discussed it in depth with obviously the Battle of Rook's Rest. What were your thoughts on this? There's a lot of kind of setting things up for the finale, but did this episode work for you?
There hasn't been an episode of House of Dragon to date that hasn't worked for me, to be perfectly honest with you. Now,
Mm.
saying that, we've been kind of no, you're never really going to be used to it. We've been kind of used to, you know, in this show, you're going to have brothers and sisters. You're going to have brothers and sisters going on it. You're going to have cousins going on it. You're going to have um, uncles and aunts with nieces and nephews. Uh, what wasn't on my bingo card for this week was a grown ass man fucking his own mother and eating her out. That
Going
was not
down
on
on
my
her.
bingo card.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
not on my bingo card for this week. And I'm like, what in the name of fuck did we just see? Like, it's just fucking. It was weird. It was weird. I've never kind of sat there and went, this is fucking awkward to watch. This is awkward. This is fucking weird. And
People
thankfully,
said they
when it was
went too
over,
far with this.
they did. They did go
Yeah.
too far
What are
with this.
your thoughts? Really?
They could have implied it happened. And now I know it was the dream sequence or a nightmare or a vision, whatever it was. They could have just implied it. The fact that you actually see it in great detail, I'm like, Jesus Christ, he's fucking his own mother. What the hell? It's weird. It's just weird. But that aside, I thought it was another. I would say it's slightly a transition where there wasn't much to this episode in terms of like what people would expect, like action, like Rook's Rest or anything like that. One thing I will say is I feel so sorry. Feel so sorry for Corliss. Jesus, the poor man has nothing left. And
Yeah.
the emotion in that very very first scene where he sits on the sea throne, I think it's called, when he sits down and the emotion in his face was like, Jesus, that's good fucking acting. He didn't have to say a word; you could just see it in his face. And I imagine some of that was actually real because he has lost his wife, but also his cast member, friend, whatever you want to say. They seem to get really, really close on and off the
Mm.
screen. They're really, really good friends. So he's lost her now. Um, it's interesting to see exactly all the moving parts now. So you have so much going on. You have Aemond, who is basically he's de facto king. It's exactly what he wanted, and I'm like, you're playing. He is. If this is Game of Thrones, he's playing the game fucking amazingly. He is doing
Mm.
this amazingly. Alicent is on the outs, just like her father. Not quite as bad as her father, but almost. It's there was a scene as well as like when Aemon's looking at the throne, and his sister comes along, and she says, "Was it worth it?" or something like that. Or,
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, it's Thanos." Fucking hell, it's Thanos all over again. What
Mm.
that was some parallels. As like, was it worth it? What did you have to give up? That type of shit. It was really, really good. I'm loving the fact as well that Jace is actually getting out and about and doing
Yes.
work that his mother's just not bothering doing. I'm not liking the what is it, Blue Thunder or Blue Steel or the with the lift.
Yeah, he
It's
does a
just
lot of
it's
blue
too
steel.
Blue
Yeah.
Blue Steel. It's too fucking much. I'm like, calm the fuck down, will you? I'm really loving the characters in this series. They've all got a depth to them that's really good. And there's one in particular that I'm absolutely loving, and I think it's is it Lord Strong or the old
Yes,
guy in
Simon
Harrenhal?
Strong.
My
Brilliant.
God, he's brilliant. And I was like,
Yes.
that would make you king consort. I'm like, oh yeah, you're gonna get your head chopped off, but fuck it, it's gonna be worth it. Um, it's really, really good. It's very much setting up more battles to come. Clearly, she still doesn't have an army. They may have lost the Blackwoods and the Brackens because of the shit that went down there. And Damon is just an idiot. He really is. It's like, did he not learn from getting the child's head chopped off? And now you're fucking with the Riverlords. Don't fuck with the River Lords. They're going to cost you the war if you do. It's as simple as that. So it's very interesting to see exactly where it's going. It's the dynamic of this show. It's pure highs of Game of Thrones again, and I am absolutely loving it. Just please, no more mother son fucking. Please, for the love of Jesus, it's like no,
No
no.
more motherfucking.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I like this episode. I don't think it's one that we're going to necessarily remember and call back on fondly. There's a lot of hipster opinions out there by people that I otherwise respect that are going, do you know what? I actually like this more than last week. No, you didn't. Stop lying. Stop saying hot takes. You did like it more than last week. It's not better than last week. Last week was one of the best episodes. Genuinely, as per ratings, I think it's on IMDb, rated in the top 5 episodes of all the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. So, and I'd agree with that. I think that's a
yeah,
fair assessment of it. This is not that, but I agree with you. There's no bad episode of House of the Dragon. I don't think they actually no. There is one bad episode, and it was actually Claire Kilner who directed it. I think the only episode I've disliked in House of the Dragon was the second last episode last season after Viserys died. Do you remember they had Kristen in his weird hat and the twins going to hunt for Aegon? That
yeah.
was that was a bit all over the place, especially after such a high episode beforehand, because we had like Viserys died, and then the slow walk through the throne room, and everything that happened there. Um, but no, I'd agree. Pretty much this show doesn't miss, but last season missed for some people just because of how they jumped around. And
Yeah.
what we missed last season and what people were actually crying for, though it's not something that gets the headlines, is an episode like this, connecting the tissue. And do you know what? I I'm not gonna say I liked the motherfucking, but like I appreciate it because it reminded me of, again, it's kind of like how in Harrenhal they're bringing back magic into this story through Damon, and with this they're bringing back weirdness, and that's something that none of us will admit we like in Game of Thrones, but it makes it interesting. It gives you something to be like, oh, what are you talking about? And that's what we'll remember this episode for. And every notable episode of Game of Thrones generally has something like that, even the lower key ones, where it's like, oh, the one where this happened, and this is the one where Damo wrote his man the dream. And look, we've all had those dreams, right? That's that's like
No.
no, Jerry, we've all, like, I'm not saying I want it, I'm just saying like no, I'm just gonna move on. I'm just getting
Yeah.
away too much there.
Mhm.
No, but like what I like as well is, apart from the riding his ma part, Damon is now playing his character in The Crown,
Mm.
where he was Prince Philip and he was the Queen's husband, and he's like, I'd like to be the king. I'd like to, and he's just kind of like he's just getting, his small dick is weighing on him, essentially, because he can't stand and stomach the idea of playing second fiddle to a woman. But I think Matt Smith is absolutely nailing this. I loved one of my favorite lines and one of the biggest laughs and one of the only laughs I got from this series, because it's not necessarily notable for its comedy, but even Game of Thrones was quite funny at times. I did not think they'd be so eager to die. Huge pop, huge, amazing, and like really good. I love the story of Alicent and Rhaenyra, how they're still parallels, how they're still sisters, even though they're on opposite sides. Um, both learning the hard lesson that men during war times, they don't mind indulging women during peace times and giving them jobs and making them feel important, but when shit hits the fan and they feel like their lives are on the line, their prejudices come out and they like to be led by men. Um, for me, Allison's arc right now is low-key probably the most interesting thing on the show, because I'm like, where is this building to? Because I haven't read ahead in the book, so I don't know what Allison does, but it feels like she's about to snap. It feels like I'm like, is she gonna turn on her family? Is she gonna turn on her son? Is there some kind of, and even I don't know, but it feels like the type of thing, because this show is being very coy with a lot of the truth. And the funny thing is that like I'm learning through a lot of the shows I'm listening to and the research I'm doing away from it, because I haven't read this far in the book, is like Damon came, like in the book, there's basically Damon came back from Harrenhal and everything was fine and nothing weird happened.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of stuff where like, and even like, they don't, the history books don't have anything about Aemond and his plots, and that's what the show is bringing to this, and the color between the lines that it's bringing. And I think even if Alicent doesn't do anything remarkable in the books, I think the show has room for her to do something, a plot or a scheme that the history books have conveniently forgotten. I feel
yeah,
like there's something there, and I'm just dying to know where it's going. Um, I loved just even like getting little things like updates on Vermitor and Silverwing. We asked about them, and we've kind of got a bit of clarity on it as well. Corlys, I do feel bad for him, but I'm also really into the vibe of him just essentially walking up to strangers because he's so lost and being like, I would make you my heir. And they're just like, nah, I'm good. You know what I mean? It just seems like he's just throwing it about now. He's got no heirs. And he's just like, he's like a kid with daddy issues who's just like picking up father figures like throughout the course of his life. Like, you know what I mean? But he's the opposite. He's got heir issues. He's got kiddie issues. And he's just like, will you be my heir? Will you? Will you? And people are just like, I'm good. Everyone around you
yeah,
seems to die. Agree with you on the fleshing out of Jace. And I agree with you with the smugness of it. And I think I worry for Jace because he's becoming very competent and he's becoming very sure of his competence. But I do like seeing him fleshed out because we spoke last week about how big of a loss the likes of Rhaenys to the show. And then we lost, obviously, Paddy Constantine in the first series. So these are big hitters that the show will miss. And we spoke last week of needing the kind of out fringe characters to step up, and they really, really did. Also, Bela and Rhaena as well, kind of taken in. They had really strong scenes both this week. And again, like yeah, I love the subtle character work, the like even just the way they're framed in the camera of the likes of the phrase and Simon Strong. His line delivery is fantastic. Like
brilliant.
everything he says, is fantastic. It's like, would you prefer the goose, or just like up. He's just, I
Oh,
just
that, like,
he
yeah, yeah, that like, he's so
yeah
worried. He's shiting himself. But yeah, even though he's shiting himself, he has the, I suppose, the courage to actually stand up to Damon in a way,
yeah
not
yeah
completely, but he's like that little comment, like you are a king consort, and
yeah
then like, oh, you're gonna get your head cut off for that, like absolutely, like this,
yeah.
like these little things has been great. But I think for me, there was one line in this particular show. I know you had
Go
your
for it.
diamond line. The one line in this particular episode was when Corlys goes to Bela and it's like, "I would make you my heir," and what the delivery, she was like, "I'm fire and blood. You need sea and
Mm.
salt." I'm like, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah."
Mm.
And now,
Alan's just
obviously,
like standing in the shadows, being like, "Dada, Dada."
yeah,
He's just there. I love what another just a little thing that I love is that like this is something we never really got from Game of Thrones. It's almost a weird. Do you ever see The Favorite, Yorgos Lanthimos's movie
no,
about brilliant movie. Watch it sometime, even if you're not into kind of royal stuff. It's farcical and it tells a story of like 18th century England, but in a very weird and like almost horror movie way. The way they frame and the way they kind of present the phrase and Simon Strong and these noblemen in a very kind of ridiculous, almost farcical way is very the favorite vibe, and that's something new for kind of House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. The only thing that I wasn't mad about is and I'd love to get your thoughts here as a book reader, because for me, where I haven't read ahead in the books is the likes of there's a few things like so Mysaria's plan to engage the small folk. I've no idea what that is, and it's not intriguing to me. Do you know what I mean? I like Massaria. She's grown on me a lot, and I do like
yeah,
how she's scaling the halls of power. But again, I don't really know. And even like stuff where they give us kind of flashes of here's Alan, here's you, without any reason to care. And obviously, look, the way the show finished with them looking up at the records and kind of saying maybe there could be dragon riders. I'm sure these random people that they're showing us throughout the course, and they're going, "Hey, just remember this person." Look. I can put two and two together. I've watched these shows before, but I feel like in a way, Game of Thrones got it really right, whether you hadn't read the books. And I watched half of it where I hadn't, and then I gave in and read all the books. So I watched through both lenses. But I feel Game of Thrones got it really right in kind of rewarding book readers' experiences. And House of the Dragon does that well. I feel for book readers where there's like, oh, they explained that whole thing. I didn't understand that when I read it, but now it makes sense. But Game of Thrones worked for non-book readers. You didn't have questions. You could understand that's probably a little throwaway for people who get it, but it didn't take up your time. It didn't bother you or leave you kind of confused. For me, House of the Dragon isn't getting that now. Like, I'm like, why are we hanging out with this guy? And I'm like, I get it. I get that you're saying I need to remember him, but it feels clunky. It feels forced. And they're getting to the point, but I need them to get to the point. I don't want to just be like, I'm Alan, turn the camera. Remember me. I'm going to be important. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. That's the only thing that isn't working for me. But I, again, really enjoyed this episode. What are your own thoughts as a book reader on that side of things? Are you seeing this and going, is that working for you?
Yeah, see, because I've read it, because I know what's happening, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. But for the non-book reader, you're like, you have to understand this is two different showrunners, for one for Game of Thrones and one for this, and they're doing things their own way. One thing I will say is about Game of Thrones is that for a lot of the time they did have George R. R. Martin there helping them, going over storyboards, going over how they should do this and how should do that. Now, obviously, they diverged from what George R. R. Martin was going to do in around about season 5, season 6, something like that. Whereas this time around, George R. R. Martin was around in the writers' room for the first season. He was only around a little bit for the second season, and he's actually come out and said he won't be there for the third season because he hasn't really liked some of the depictions that's happening.
He's getting salty too.
He is getting salty. Now it's very petty stuff. It's like, oh, the Dragon Banner, they should only have 2 legs. This has 4. Like, shove it up your bollocks. Why don't you finish a book, dickhead? Why don't you finish a book? What are you in 10 Jesus years or 12 years or 14 years? Finish a fucking book. Yeah, bollocks, yeah. I couldn't care less because I'm loving it. Now, I can understand where you're coming from here is that you're literally being thrown these people in front of you, but for what reason you don't know. The thing is, I know the reason, and I think that therein lies the problem. Is that the showrunner of this? I don't know the showrunner of this show is saying, "Oh, you should have read the book before you watched the show." So it's a thing where they're expecting you to have read the book, whereas Dan Weiss and David Benioff and DB Weiss, you know who I'm talking about, they were like, "Well, no, this has to be for everybody." This has to be for everybody, so we have to do it in a certain way. So I think it's just creative styles, but it's not that I'm certainly liking it. I know you're liking it, but this is the thing that's not hitting you. Give it an episode. Give it, like, we've only got 3 episodes left.
Yeah.
All will become clear. That's all I'm going to say because you know me. I don't do spoilers. All will become clear, especially with the first part, which was Miss Saria's stuff. So watch this space. You'll just what happens.
Okay. Yeah, and look, I think they're heading towards, careening towards like the finish line. It's clear that something cool is going to happen, and I don't think I'll have this complaint at the end of the series. But right now it's just a bit clunky. But I also haven't too bothered by that because I'm like, this is obviously the big season 2 story. This story has to be fleshed out. They're saying 4 or 5 seasons this can go, so there's a lot of games still left to play. So this is obviously the big story that they're getting towards. So I'm not that frustrated because I know answers are coming within the next few weeks, and we're going to be sitting here at the end of it all going, I can't believe it's over. Like, I wish I was back there. But anyway, look, that's for then. That's House of the Dragon for this week. Next week, we're going to be touching on it as well when we do our Deadpool and Wolverine reviews. And then after that, for the last 2 episodes, we're going to go back to full reviews.